much for that music. And this morning we are continuing our series on how we got our Bible, and we're going to take up a special topic probably that few have been exposed to, and that is textual criticism.
I'm not sure your mic is on.
It's on.
Oh, okay.
I believe it is.
I'm not seeing the reaction when you talk, so maybe a little closer.
Lorraine, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I think he's right. He might not be on mic.
No, the mic is on, but he's not close enough to it to make any reaction on this. Big
Maybe you
event.
raise it up a little bit.
Maybe put it on his side.
So you want to give Chloe a handout?
If you can talk.
Okay. All right, is this any better? It's not?
Sorry I mentioned it.
Oh, that's okay.
Is this any better?
I mean, I hear you, but you're not on mic.
Chloe, can you hear me? You can?
Oh, I can.
I wonder if we should have turned it up a little bit.
It's on, it's just the mic
It's
doesn't
on.
pick up, it
It just
doesn't
needs to
pick up
come
the
up.
sound that good.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what button, it doesn't pick it up.
it's on.
It's on.
Yeah, it's on.
That wasn't the problem.
Chloe, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, to introduce textual criticism to you, let me tell you about David. And I may have mentioned him before, I don't know. When I was a student at Dallas Seminary, soon I worked part-time in a huge apartment complex as assistant manager. And so the boss let me sit in the office and study if I wasn't dealing with any of the tenants. And so one day I was studying in my office, and into my office comes David, who had just divorced, now we're in Dallas, who just divorced back in Denver his wife. He came to Dallas to make a new start in life. He was interested in looking at an apartment, so I took him around and showed him some apartments. He said, I really like these apartments. I said, okay, let's go back to the office, I'll give you an application blank. So as I'm handing him the application blank, he looks down at my desk. Now I've got a Hebrew Bible here, I've got lots of lexicons and commentaries around me. And he asked, is that Hebrew? And I said, yes. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm studying the book of Genesis in the Old Testament. And he asked me, do you people who study the Bible realize, do you even know that all the manuscripts of the Old Testament and the New Testament do not read the same verse in the same way? And I said, yes, I do. And then he asked another question. Then how can you have any confidence that when you read a verse in the Bible, you are reading the words that the author actually wrote, rather than reading what a scribe accidentally wrote? And I said, well, when you walked into my office, I was working on some of these textual problems, as they're called, in Genesis chapter 2. I said, would you like me to show you how scholars read these and solve these problems? He said, yeah, I would. Now, he didn't know what Hebrew, he didn't need to. I just took my pencil and I went through one textual problem after another, where in, let's say, one verse, this manuscript reads the verse this way, but that manuscript reads that same verse in a different way. And when I showed him how scholars solve those problems, I said, now tell me, whether we read the verse this way or that way, does it really make any difference? He said, no. It comes out to mean the same thing, just a wee bit of difference or emphasis. And so I could just see his confidence in the Bible increasing just wee by bit as we went through one textual problem after another. And then he asked, do you have a little time to talk? Now, he was hurting, divorced his wife. His life was empty. He didn't know what life was about. Well, a few minutes turned into 3 hours of talking. And David eventually moved into that apartment complex. He would come over to my apartment and borrow one book after another, read those books, and then we would get together and discuss each book. And I said, David, you need to be in church. And so he said, well, what church do I go to? And I said, well, how about attending the church my wife and I attend? It's a real good church. He started coming to that church and especially attending the midweek service And I talked to some of the people in that midweek service. They said, oh, this guy asked lots of hard questions, and he was very argumentative. And we just loved him the best we could. We answered the questions the best he could. He became a Christian. Show fruits worthy of repentance. He goes back to Denver, reconciles with his wife, gets on his knee and asks her, can you forgive me for the awful way I've treated you, and would you remarry me? And she said yes. He brought her to Dallas. Now, I remember talking to her before she became a Christian. She didn't have the slightest confidence in the Bible. But later she was converted, and she told me, I became a Christian not because of those scholarly arguments that my husband was giving. I became a Christian because of my husband's change in attitude and character and conduct. He is not the same man. I'm convinced that Christianity is real because Jesus has changed my husband into a loving man, and he's no longer a monster who used to abuse me.
Wow.
Now, those two conversions were the indirect result of our topic today, textual criticism. And somebody in the church, that would be you and me, need to know something about textual criticism. So I'm going to give you 2 lessons on textual criticism, one today and then one later on the New Testament. So let's begin now with our definition of textual criticism, and we need to get this fixed in mind because this is the topic of this hour. What is textual criticism? All right, here is the definition right here. Now let's put our thinking caps on. We've got to get this definition fixed in our understanding. Textual criticism is the study of the copies of any written work. Now, why study the copies of a written work rather than why not study the written work itself? Look at the next statement. Of which the original manuscript is lost. You don't have the original. So the best you can do is study the copies that were made from the original. And why? Last line, for the purpose of determining the wording of that original text. Now, is there anybody here who can quote the first verse in the book of Genesis? Let me see your hand if you can quote it.
I mean, everybody can.
Okay, I know, Bob, you can. And what did you say?
Well, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
No,
That's Genesis.
John.
Oh,
Genesis.
That's John. That's John. I want to know about the first verse of the Bible. I know Bob can do it. All right, Ben, try.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without.
Whoa. I don't know verse 2. You made one mistake. You said, in the beginning, listen and see if you can catch the mistakes you made. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. What mistake did you make?
Did she say heavens?
Heavens, plural. Okay, all right, so you almost got it. Now, I want to know this. We don't have the original manuscript of Genesis. So how do you know that's the way Genesis 1:1 reads?
God told me.
Well, I can't really accept that answer. I mean, that's good enough for you, but for David from Denver who has severe doubts about the Bible, that's not going to cut the cake, see? All right, so my point is this. Now, I want to know what is meant by the term autographer. What are the autographer? Now, that's a term I asked you all to remember.
Yeah.
And the autographer are the original 66 manuscripts of the Bible. We have 66 books in the Bible, 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. And how many of the autographer, the original manuscripts do we have? We don't have one of them. So now the question is, you quoted Genesis 1:1, but how do we know what words Moses actually wrote in Genesis 1:1 since we don't have his original manuscript on Genesis? Textual criticism. That is going to be an immense help to you and me. You may not think this lesson is relevant to you, but what I want to say is this. Without textual criticism, we could have no English translations, German translations, Latin translations. How could we? We wouldn't know what words Moses wrote in Genesis, what words Paul wrote in the book of Ephesians. So textual criticism is the reason why you have a Bible in your hand today. Now, why do textual criticism? I'm on number 2. The need for textual criticism. There are 2 reasons. No extant autographer. What we just said, we have not one of the 66 original manuscripts of the Bible. Now, if we had the original manuscripts that Paul wrote on the book of Romans, we wouldn't have to study the manuscript copies made on Romans. We would have the original. We would know exactly, with absolute confidence, every word that Paul wrote in his letter to the Roman church. Now, though we have thousands of copies of the autographer, look at B. The manuscript copies we have are flawed. Notice what I've written here. The manuscript copies in existence do not always agree with one another and read the same verse in the same manner. So textual critics must determine which manuscripts preserve the original reading of a biblical passage and which manuscripts are in error. The terms variant or variant readings both mean an optional reading in a verse. That is, it is a different wording of the same verse in various manuscripts. For example, manuscripts read Genesis 2:2 in 2 ways. Now, some manuscripts read Genesis 2:2. Now, here is the first variant. That is, here is the first way manuscripts read Genesis 2:2. And it goes like this. On the 7th day, God completed his work. But not all manuscripts read it that way. Some manuscripts read variant 2. And on the 6th day, God completed his work. Both cannot be correct. One is right and the other is wrong. So how do we know whether it reads on the 6th day or on the 7th day? Textual criticism will answer that question. Now, the importance of textual criticism then, at the top of your page, I think 118. The importance of textual criticism, it's important for 3 reasons. A, it establishes the text of the Old Testament and New Testament. If the original manuscript on the book of Romans were extant, that means in existence, we would know for sure how the epistle read. That is, it would authoritatively reveal what words Paul was divinely inspired to write. But that autograph on Romans is not at hand today. So the many manuscripts, along with other textual aids, must be used to determine the Romans text. B, a confidence builder. Oh, I want to define variant reading. Now, I want us to remember what a variant is, or a variant reading. A manuscript reads a verse in one way, but another manuscript reads the same verse in a different way. So we have 2 different variant ways to read the same verse. That's the problem. So now, let's look at a confidence builder. I'm under your 3B. If the facts are presented incorrectly, textual criticism, can destroy a person's confidence in the purity and accuracy of the Bible. But if the facts are presented correctly, textual criticism can strengthen one's trust in the Bible. Now, did you know that the Muslims today completely write off the New Testament? Now, they don't write off the Old Testament, but Muslims today have nothing to do with the New Testament because they have been told, correctly so, that not all New Testament manuscripts read the New Testament verses in the same way. So they completely dismiss it. But I would like to say this to our Muslim friends. Not all the manuscripts in the Hebrew Bible read the same verses in the same way, but they don't dare write the Old Testament off. Now, why do they write the New Testament off? Jesus it presents him as the S-O-N of God. They are adamant. Jesus was a great prophet. He was not the Son of God. In fact, they say God has no son. Now, if Jesus is the Son of God, the Muslims are in danger. Their faith is fraudulent if Jesus is the Son of God. That's why they don't like the New Testament. They just get rid of it. Now look at C, 3C, translation selection. Textual criticism can help a person in deciding which translation of the Bible to purchase. For example, the King James New Testament is based upon a few late, inferior manuscripts. Both the Revised Versions and the American Standard Version's New Testament are based on more earlier and better manuscripts. But the Old Testament and all three of these versions were translated without the help of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Christian Standard Version of the Old Testament takes into account the Dead Sea Scrolls, and its New Testament is based upon 5,000 Greek manuscripts, both late and early. So the Christian Standard Bible is based upon a more solid foundation and ought to be a better translation. Now let's go to number 4. What sources do scholars use to establish, determine the biblical text? What sources do they draw from? There are 3. A, the manuscripts. We have in hand today a little more than 1,300 Hebrew manuscripts of the Old Testament and about 5,300 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. Textual critics compare every letter of every word in a manuscript with every letter of every word in other manuscripts, all for the purpose of trying to determine what the biblical author likely wrote in his autography. B, second source, ancient versions. Long ago, from the Hebrew manuscripts, the Old Testament was translated into ancient languages. These translations are called versions, such as the Vulgate, Latin Vulgate, the Syriac Peshitta. Similarly, from the Greek manuscripts into Old tongues, the New Testament was rendered, these versions being the Peshitta, the old Latin translations, etc. From these versions, scholars can reconstruct the Hebrew text that these versions were translated from, and by so doing, have indirect access to manuscripts that perhaps are not extant today. Then this reconstructed Hebrew text is compared both with the extant Hebrew manuscripts at hand today and with the Hebrew Bible to ascertain accuracy. And then at the top of the next page, a third source is used, quotations from ancient authorities. From the manuscripts, the Old Testament Hebrew text was often cited in ancient authorities such as the Mishnah, which dates AD 350, and the Talmud, which dates AD 500. And from the Greek manuscripts, the New Testament was also quoted quite often in the writings of the early church fathers. Who are the early church fathers? The leaders of the early Christian church after the apostles. Textual scholars now compare these quotations with the extant manuscripts and with our Hebrew and Greek Bibles to see how accurate the latter are. Now let's consider the changes scribes made in manuscripts. I've been saying now that all these manuscripts are imperfect. They don't all read the same verse in the same way. So why? Well, the changes that have been made. I'm in number 5. In copying new manuscripts, scribes were far more times than not accurate, but occasionally they did make mistakes. There were 2 basic types of mistakes, unintentional and intentional alterations to the manuscripts. Following are examples of unintentional mistakes. And I want to begin with 5A, fusion. This is incorrectly combining 2 separate words into one word. For example, in English, the sentence, the man offered a hand out. You see a man drowning in water and you offer him your hand, one word, out, other word. The man offered him a handout could be misread as the man offered a hand out. Now you have in your hand a handout that I have prepared for this lesson. Hand out, one word. The 2 words hand out were wrongly fused into one word, handout. In like manner, this same error occurs in Amos 6:12. All right? Here is Amos 6:12. Here, there are 2 ways the manuscripts read it. Now, I want you to look at these 2 letters right here. Yom. When these 2 letters are written by themselves, they mean S-E-A. So, very 1 reads Amos 6:12. Does a person plow the sea with oxen? But if you take those two letters right here and stick, here are the same two letters right here. When you take these two letters right here and put them on the end of a word, they no longer mean SEA, they mean them. So variant 2 is going to read this verse. Does one plow them with oxen? All right. So sometimes scribes wrongly put two separate words into one word as they did here. All right. Then let's go down to the bottom of page 119. B. Fission. The opposite of the above error, fission, is when one word is incorrectly separated or split into two different words. When the letter cough prefixes a word, it is a preposition meaning like. When it is a suffix on the end of a word, it means your. And in Hosea 6:5, the original text reads, okay, no, that's not what I want. I want this right here. Now, here is the issue. This letter, see where my red dot is? That's a preposition, cough, and when you put it on the front of a word, it means like. But if you take that cough off and put it on the end of a word, now here it is. Now I realize that this preposition, notice the way it's written, doesn't look like it does here. But just take my word for it that this letter is the same letter here. Only this letter begins a word meaning like, and this letter, the same letter, ends the word meaning your. So this verse is going to read, my judgment goes forth like light, and this is what God inspired Hosea to write right here. But it was accidentally put by a scribe on the end of the word, so it reads, your judgment light goes forth. So you have to realize that while as good as scribes were, they were like you and me. Do you do your job always 100% correct? No human being is capable of doing that. Let's go to the top of page 120. The next mistake is called homoiotoluton. Now this is made up of compound. Homoio means the same, and toluton means ending, the same ending. Now look at the definition. What is homoiotoluton? The omission of a word because it has the same endings as other words. And this error occurs in Mark 1:1. Now, here, this verse is read two different ways. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Period 2, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, period. So if we go with reading 2, is Jesus the Son of God or not? Don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. If we go with variant 1, Jesus Christ is clearly designated as the Son of God. And I want you to know that this is the original reading. Now what happened? Well, I want you to look carefully. This word ends with O-U. See that? Just like these Greek letters, just like our English letters. O-U, 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 O-U. Now, as a scribe was writing from this old manuscript here, copying a new manuscript here, when he got down to this O-U, he thought wrongly that he had just finished copying this word that also ends in O-U, so he accidentally left off the last two words. And he reads it like this. But here is the way the text should read there in the first reading. Let me pause here. Any questions so far? All right, let's go to D, hoplography. All right, I want you to know, hopla means once and graphy to write. All right, look at what I've written here. What is hoplography? Writing a word once when it should be written twice. The spurious variant in Judges 20:13 reads as follows. Okay, now, Judges 20:13 is written two ways. Here's variant 1, here's the first way it's written, here's variant 2, the second way. And I want to begin with variant 2. Now look where my red dot is. Notice these three letters, Beth, Nun, Yod. Those three letters mean the sons of. Notice that? The sons of. Now, I want you, let's go right here. We have Beth Nun, Yod, the sons of, and Be, Nun, Yod. These three letters, the sons of, are also the first three letters of the name Benjamin. So this verse is going to read, the Benjamites, they would not listen. The sons of Benjamin would not listen. Now look at what variant 1 says. Benjamin would not listen. Now is it Benjamin that wouldn't listen to God? Or is it the sons of God that wouldn't listen? The sons of Benjamin that wouldn't listen to God? What I want to point out is these three letters right here should be written twice. First by themselves, meaning the sons of, and then they should be written a second time as the first half of the name Benjamin. And these three words were accidentally left out right here. So variant 1 blames Benjamin with refusing to listen to God. Actually, this is the correct reading. The Benjamites, the sons of Benjamin, would not listen to God. You see how mistakes like that can happen? Look down at E, the bottom. Didography. Ta means twice and graphy to write. Now, here's the way this reads. There's two ways to read this. The word yidrok appears twice. Yidrok. Don't let the archer, yidrok. Don't let the archer bend his bow. Now, a scribe was copying a manuscript, and probably his mind wandered, or he began to wonder what he was going to eat for lunch that day, and he made a mistake and wrote this word 2 times. And it should be written like this. Don't let the archer, bend his bow. Now, later scribes, when they copied a new manuscript from Jeremiah, they came across this. And they saw that the word bend occurs twice. And those later scribes said, I know dead well that the word bend should appear only 1 time. I really want to take my eraser and erase one of those bends. They had such reverence for God's word, they usually didn't crank mistakes like that. Turn the page, please. F, metathesis. Metathesis, what is it? Reversing the proper position of letters within a word. This happens to you and me in English. For instance, T-E-H sometimes is written for T-H-E. And A-D-N occurs for A-N-D. In like manner, the two variant readings are found in the manuscripts of Deuteronomy 31:1. All right? And so the first reading is, now notice what we have here. We have Lamed Koth. And Moses went forward. Lamed Koth. Now, variant 2, we're going to reverse Lamed Koth into Koth Lamed. And Moses finished. So if you just turn 2 letters around, you got 2 different verbs. So is the reading Moses went forth or Moses finished? Textual criticism will answer that question for us. Next mistake is audio. The scribe recording a new manuscript, now often scribes would work in pairs as a team. For example, you and I are going to work together and come up with a new manuscript on Matthew. I am going to read 1 word of Matthew at a time. You hear what I say, and you write the word that you hear me say. Now look at the definition. Audio. I'm under G. The scribe recording a new manuscript incorrectly hears the reading scribe who pronounces each word from the old manuscript. This error occurs in some manuscripts on Matthew 19:24. All right? So what the reading scribe said was, it is easier for a camelon to go through the eye of a needle. What the recording scribe thought he heard was, it is easier for a camelon to go through the eye of a needle. Camelon, camel, camelon, rope. You can see how the 2 words are very similar there. And here is the correct reading right here. H, vision. Poor eyesight or dim lighting resulted sometimes in the variant readings like 1 Timothy 3:16. All right, here's 1 Timothy 3:16. the first variant, who was manifest in flesh. Variant 2, God was manifest in flesh. Now, this is a big O in Greek, and this doesn't look like it, but this is also a big O in Greek. Notice the only difference is this big O doesn't have any horizontal line through it. This big O has a horizontal line through it. So without the horizontal line, has means who. With the horizontal line, this word means God. God was manifest in the flesh. And by the way, I made a mistake. These two letters shouldn't be here. These two letters shouldn't be here. When this big O, there is a horizontal line through it. So what I'm saying here is that little horizontal line turns who into the word God. Turn the page, please. Faulty memory. Faulty memory. Old Testament scribes who were professionals were prohibited from copying by depending on their memory of how a verse reads. But some New Testament scribes, not all of them, not all of whom were professionals, would rarely, now they did change it, they did lean on their memory, would rarely lean on their memory, which is like everyone else's, is sometimes flawed. Perhaps this caused the two variants to appear in manuscripts on Ephesians 5:9. So variant 1 reads, now I don't know what happened here, folks. I could not get the Greek text to come out here. I tried everything I could. The devil was in my computer on this. But the variant 1 reads, the fruit of the light consists in all goodness. And variant 2 reads everything the same way except this right here. The fruit of the Spirit consists in all goodness. Now here's the correct reading right here. But probably a scribe was depending on his memory like Beth did a while ago. And she made one mistake in her faulty memory. And this guy was thinking, probably thinking of influenced too much by Galatians 5:22, which does read the fruit of the Spirit. But Ephesians 5:9 doesn't read the fruit of the Spirit, it reads the fruit of life. All right, next mistake is mental lapse. Is that what I've got? Mental lapse. Due to a momentary pause in concentration, a scribe can easily replace the original word with a similar but spurious one. This occurred in Mark 14:65. And so this verse is going to read two ways. Now again, I just could not get the Greek text to come out. The officers took Jesus with slaps. Elabon. The officers cast him out with slaps. Ebawan. Now let me point out what happens here. If you read this verb with the L coming before a B, it means took. But if you turn the L and B around as you do here you got LB, here you got BL, you turn took into cast. The officers cast him out with slaps, and this is the correct reading right here. K, down at the bottom, homophony, what is this? The substitution of a similar sounding word. This occurs in English as there can be confused with there, and C, S-E-E, with C, S-E-A. The same error caused two variants in Isaiah 9:2. All right, let's look at this real quick. You will multiply the nation, you will increase its joy. Here's the word for its. Listen how it sounds. Low. Low. Variant 2, you will multiply the nation, you will not increase joy. The word not, here it is. Listen to how it sounds. Low. Low, it's, low, not. Low, it's, lamed, yod, low, not. Lamed, olive. Two different words, but they sound the same. Turn the page. All right, let's go to number 8, intentional changes. Not all alterations in the manuscripts are accidental, some were deliberate. The following fall into this category. Orthographic. A variant in spelling can give rise to different readings. Often a scribe would change an archaic and old spelling to a more current one. This happens in Matthew 1:10. All right? Period 1 reads, Hezekiah begat Manasseh. Period 2 reads, Hezekiah begat Manasseh. What's the difference? Now, you have to look carefully. Look at my red dot. This man's name used to be spelled ending with an Ada right there. Ada. Later, as time passed, this man's name was spelled ending with an Ada nu. It ends with an Ada by itself. It means Manasseh. Now, the newer spelling is an Ada nu. It also means Manasseh. I think this, notice what I've written right under that. In Greek, Manasseh's name in the accusative case was formerly spelled ending with an Ada. Later, the accusative ending on the same name was Ada nu. Compare the names. Kathy with a C, Kathy with a K. Ann with A-N-E, without an E, and ending in an E. I think those names are the same. What's the difference between a C and a K? Not much. Let's go to harmonizing. Let's go to harmonizing. An attempt to make a parallel passage read the same way so as to agree with each other. An instance of this occurs when scribes conformed Luke 11:2 to read like Matthew 6:9. All right, so Luke 11:2 reads, when you pray, say, Father. But Matthew reads it, when you pray, say, our Father who art in heaven. Now, when scribes come across parallel passages, they want them to read the same way. They want everything to fit. So scribes would copy these words in the Matthew passage and put them in the Luke passage. They would add to it so that Luke reads, when you pray, say, our Father who art in heaven. And now it agrees with a parallel when you pray, say, our Father who art in heaven. Turn the page. Historical. Now, scribes wanted everything to line up with history. And so in Matthew 6:21, this is read two ways. And after 3 days, Jesus was to be raised. Period 2, and on the 3rd day, he was to be raised. Here's the correct reading. It sounds like it's incorrect. Scribes don't like that. So they would scratch out after and put in the word one right here. Conflation. Now, conflation just means you've got two different ways of verses read. The scribes couldn't make up their mind which was correct, so they just put both in a third reading. For example, Romans 3:23, the first way it's read is, God's righteousness is through faith in Christ for all believers. Period 2, God's righteousness is through faith in Christ upon all believers. The scribe said, well, I don't know if this is the true reading. I don't know if this is the true reading. Let's just put them both together in a third reading. That way we're sure we got the correct reading in there somewhere. God's righteousness is through faith in Christ for and upon all believers. Grammatical, all right. Now I want you to notice carefully. This is talking about Jesus. Jesus, entered the house. And again a crowd gathered. So that they referred to Jesus and the 12. So that they were unable to eat a meal. Now this is the problem to the scribes. Why? Well, we see Jesus go in the house, but the verse doesn't say the 12 disciples go in the house. He begins the sentence going into a house by himself, and yet here he was with the 12 disciples. So what did they do? They changed it. We don't want third person singular here to begin the verse and third person plural to end the verse. So they changed it to read, they, Jesus and the 12 enter the house, so that they, Jesus and the 12, were unable to eat a meal. They want everything to square up with each other. Doctrinal. This kind of demon cannot come out, this kind of demon cannot be cast out by nothing except prayer. Period. Now that's the true reading. But some scribes were big on fasting. And they were saying, oh, wait a minute. Now you got an unusually evil, strong demon. You can't cast him out just with prayer. You must cast him out with prayer and fasting. So they would add the word fasting onto that. Favored, familiar. favored, familiar. We could say, don't step on that serpent right there. But we probably wouldn't use the word serpent. What word would we use? Snake. We could say, I see a tortoise in the water. We could say that, but we probably wouldn't. What would we say?
Turtle.
I see a turtle. So there are certain words we favor in English over other words that mean the same thing. Same thing in Hebrew. He had been sick and had recuperated. Or he had been sick and had recovered. Well, here's the favored word. Here's the unfavored word, and this is probably the original right there. The waters, the flood, variant 1, the flood came upon the earth. Flood of what? Locusts? Flood of invading soldiers? To make sure we understand what kind of flood came upon the earth, the scribes add water. The flood of waters during Noah's days came upon the earth. And lastly, euphemism. Adner took Eshbal, Saul's son. They didn't like Eshbal, which means Baal is the Canaanite god Baal, B-A-L-L. Who would name his son after the Canaanite god Baal? They changed it to Adner took Ishbosheth, which means man ashamed, Saul's son. So he still has a bad name, but it's not as bad as this right here. So, no, that's not what I want. No, that's not what I want. Okay, I guess I don't have what I wanted here. No, I don't. Okay, now, the point of this lesson is you can see how the manuscripts read different ways on the same verse. Textual scholars have done you and me a huge favor by dealing with all these mistakes and errors, whether they're intentional or unintentional, to give us the original text that God inspired the authors to write. They've done you and me a huge service, and yet most Christians have no idea of all the work that goes on in translating the Bible. They just don't know that. Now, I don't think this lesson is clear enough to show you how pure the text is. There's a lesson that's coming up, and you will be amazed at the sovereignty of God and the way He has kept His Word pure and preserved the accuracy of the biblical text down through the centuries for you and me. All right, any questions or comments real quick on this lesson?
You might want to address the word criticism that has a negative.
Yeah, that's a good point. Criticism is not necessarily a bad term. Now, we use it more negative, like that man over there is just full of criticism about Donald Trump. But criticism simply means to judge, to assess something, to decide on something. So criticism is not a bad word. I appreciate that, Bob.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in this context, criticism is, like you said, an assessment of, it's a difference between a definition of a word and a connotation of a word.
No, that's not textual criticism. That's more lexicography, defining words. This textual criticism is, did the biblical writer record this word or a different word? Not the definitions, this word or a different word. That's what textual criticism is. Okay, we're out of time, and that is it. That is it.